Okay, this is from the perspective of the walkway from the academic building to the residence halls. I'm on the residence hall side, pointed towards the academic building, getting the pathway between them. Yeah, the microphone is about 2 to 3 feet off the ground right now.
I think field recording is important for a number of reasons. One of the things that it does is it really incentivizes presence for your environment. Field recording is something that takes time. You can't just snap a photo and it be over with. It's an event that occurs over duration. So with that, if you are attending your recorder, if you're there with the recorder, you are experiencing the environment in real time and having an effect on the environment as well. Your very presence will change your surroundings. And that's one thing, if you do nature recording, you'll note very quickly when you go into your recording spot and set up your microphones and record as you need to, the sound of your environment will be much different at that moment than it will be 30 minutes later. Because most humans, when they're romping around different locations, nature knows you're there, and the creatures are going to shirk back and wait because they don't know what's going to happen. You could be a threat. But as you sit in that space, as you spend time in that space, you start to get more integrated into the space, and it starts to open up around you. And there's a lot of parallels for that in life. If you just, wantonly run around, you can have experiences, but they're going to be different sort of experiences than if you sit and really reflect on what's going on around you. Initial interest in audio. My interest in audio goes back many years. So from a very early age, I gripped onto music, and early on I wanted to be a composer, but as life went on, I found more of a niche in non-musical sound and sound design and field recording. That's one aspect of field recording that is far removed from studio recording, is that you cede control over your circumstances. Studio recording is all about controlling things as much as you can in order to have a desired effect. Field recording, you let the world do what it's doing. And it can have varying gradations from you having some control of like, okay, well, I'm going to go to this place and record a bunch of firearms. You have control over the subject then. You have firearms you're doing, the location you're doing, hopefully you've scouted it out, so you kind of know like, well, there's not going to be traffic this day because of this sort of thing. You can't really control that. You can't control the wind, you can't control the temperature, but those are things that you can take into consideration. But why is field recording important? So there's the presence, there's the mindfulness that can happen with it. There's also, field recording sound is one of our dominant senses. Especially in America, in English-based societies, like we really prioritize vision a lot, but our ears are one of the only senses that don't turn off. We never stop hearing things. Our body paralyzes itself, when we sleep. Our eyes shut, we don't see, but our ears are always present in the environment. They're always orienting ourselves and always with us, unless, we happen to have some condition that makes it so we can't hear anymore, in which case you have a richness of experience in your other senses. But with it being an important part of the human experience, there's so many things that we take for granted that are sound-based. Sound itself is something that's ephemeral. It happens, and it's an energy that happens and disappears very quickly. It's not something that we can just, build a building that lasts 100 years. You can't just build a sound that will continue for 100 years. Nothing is permanent. There's always a chance to change. But if you don't know your history, if you don't know where you've come from, you won't be able to avoid the same issues or be able to learn from the lessons that others have learned before you. The history of the Upper Peninsula is very much my history. It's a history that I've been entwined with my whole life. I grew up in a house that's been in my family for over 100 years. And so with that, I've heard many stories over the years of how places have changed, how this place has changed. When I think Upper Peninsula, I think Copper Country, I think my little slice of this area. But it expounds beyond that, expands those horizons beyond just this one location. But I think having a very deep connection with one spot allows you to see the possibilities of other areas much more. It expands your breadth of knowing. If you've seen 100 places once, but one place 100 times, those are two much different ways of operating in the world. Because in the 100 instances of the single place, you've probably seen it in different lighting. You probably know, oh, well, if it's foggy here, like there's probably going to be deer crossing this road at this time in this season, which is a much different existence than if you just visited Paris once and saw the Eiffel Tower. But the history of the Upper Peninsula, the history of the Copper Country, is something that I feel a very deep connection to. This lived environment happens to be a post-industrial environment, and so that's something that as a person I've continued to be fascinated by. The ruins of what once was 100, 150 years ago now, and the world that is today are two much different things in their experiences. And to be able to think of those possibilities and think of how people lived then and how we live now can show us ways, both the consequences of the choices we're making today, as well as the possibilities of what we can have tomorrow. Nothing is permanent. One thing that's important with the company is to try to create libraries that are both commercially successful as well as culturally valuable. And so there's a fine line in terms of there's not that much extra information that needs to be collected in order for you to create a library that has more information than just, oh, well, it's this thing. If you can package it in a way where you have data about basic aspects of what the item is, you can create something that is a little bit more useful in the long term. The more information, the more specific you can be about the subject that you're recording, and the more information, metadata you record about it, the more that can be gleaned about it down the road. Engines in another 50 years could be something that people don't hear anymore. So if they're trying to recreate 2010 or 2020 and remake the sound of what it would be like to live in this time, they would need to have a car that existed in this era. So it'd have to be newer than, it would have to be older than, if we're saying 2020, it'd have to be older than 2020. So a 2010 Subaru Forester would probably work. And if they're being even more specific of like, well, okay, we're doing this up in Houghton, Michigan, what kind of cars do they have in Houghton, Michigan? Well, you know, everyone drives Camaros in Houghton. No. People drive much more practical cars up here. You're going to hear a lot of trucks. You're going to hear a lot of four-wheel drive vehicles, things that, you know, can deal with the snow. So something like a Subaru Forester would fall within that category for something that would be specific to this location. And so as you get that bit of data, and if you record it in ways that are flexible, you can use it in many more regards in being able to create things further down the road in ways that you have no idea now. One thing with the role that I have here is that I spend much of my time in service to other people, which is by itself something that is very good, but it doesn't always leave me the most time and space for the things that I want to be doing. There's always going to be working with collaborators and always trying to just work, but I would like to try to find a way to insert things that are really meaningful for me as well in the work that I do. And that could be something I can find here. I don't know. And that's a conversation to have with people. It could be that, you know, I may not be even permanently employed here, but it could be I end up being a sort of like adjunct professor. It's hard to say, but I think so long as I am in Houghton, which I don't think I'm going to be leaving the county anytime soon, I think I will always be in orbit of this place because of it being a nexus in this region for the kind of work that we do as an industry and for the kind of work that I want to do. There's natural collaborators here, there's resources here that are not present in other parts of the community.